the University of California, a wonderful course on Eastern Europe, and is also a reporter and a columnist for what I think is one of Poland's most interesting newspapers, Gazeta Wyborcza. So, Konstanty.
Thank you. We used to think that propaganda is what the bad guys do. In fact, propaganda is what anybody can do. The good guys can use it as well. Manipulate, deceive, in the best possible intentions. In Poland in '81, the communist military staged a coup against the trade union movement Solidarność. This is a snapshot, famous snapshot taken by the photographer Chris Niedenthal on the first day of the coup in downtown Warsaw. It shows a military armed personal carrier and a military patrol stationed in front of a cinema. The cinema is called Moscow. That was the name of the cinema. The banner gives the title of the film that was playing there the day before. It is Apocalypse Now. And what the photographer did not know was that the cinema was used as a detention center. Behind those walls, there were several hundred people arrested, then interned, some of them my friends. This is probably as clear as it gets, as black and white as it gets. And in fact, the government's propaganda was not exactly an example of subtlety. The caption on this poster says, "From the dark Middle Ages, a crusade against Poland." You see a medieval Teutonic knight, then the former Chancellor of Germany, Konrad Adenauer, in a Teutonic knight's mantle, and of course Ronald Reagan in a cowboy movie. This is the enemy. The foreigner is the enemy. We, the Polish military, are defending the country against this. Although at that time we refused to believe this, this did have a certain appeal. The country was divided about the coup. What, however, the authors of this poster failed to appreciate was that the Middle Ages were quite some time ago, Adenauer was dead, and the public liked cowboy movies. Against this propaganda, we resorted to our own. This is a demonstration on Constitution Day, with solidarity leaflets flying above the crowd. Everything we managed to print, to publish, was immediately grabbed out by a public thirsty for what they believed was non-propaganda, but in fact, truth itself. At the same time, we organized a very successful campaign for the public to boycott government propaganda. Government newspapers were not supposed to be bought on a certain day of the week. More importantly, people were instructed to boycott the main edition of state TV news at 7:30. This was a very safe and at the same time very spectacular form of political demonstration. People were invited to take walks at 7:30. And in fact, 7:30, the streets were full of people. In one town, in southeastern Poland, town of Świdnik, somebody had the brilliant idea of telling people to take their TV sets with them on baby carriages and stroll them on the streets. The government reacted to this beautifully. It clamped down a curfew at 7. But whereas leaflets and then very quickly underground publications, this happens to be the one I published, became immensely popular and widely available. The government estimated at that time that some 4 million Poles in a nation of 36 million have regular access to underground publications. We operated outside of any control. The assumption was that we were telling the truth, they are lying. Or as a friend of mine said, if in December we write that it's plus 25 centigrade, people will go out on the streets in swimming trunks. Now, this is an extremely dangerous power to have. Early in the period of martial law, different social milieus started drafting lists of collaborators, traitors, people who supported the military government and should have supported the opposition. Those lists were broadcast and published in the underground media with incredible effect. One writer, who in fact did overtly support the military regime, appeared on TV, therefore breaking a double taboo. Decent people do not appear on TV and emphatically do not support the regime. A quite popular writer had people dumping his books on his doorstep day after day, until finally a military checkpoint was placed in front of that building to prevent people from doing so. However, there was no way to verify whether the people that different milieus had decided to label as collaborators, in fact, were collaborators. There could have been cases of mistaken identity, there could have been cases of overzealous condemnation, there could have been cases of personal vendetta. My paper very quickly refused to publish lists of collaborators. Other papers continued, and obviously there were cases of extreme injustice done. However, the injustice seemed to pale in the face of this. At this point, we were clearly the underdog. You forgive the underdog for biting. We incarnated part of the national tradition. This was the revolutionary, subversive, dissident tradition. However, if you were a partisan of law and order, a demonstration such as this would not encourage you to support underground solidarity. You might think that solidarity is right, the government is wrong. However, law and order is a value in itself. You do not want to support, well, demonstrators, subversives. What the movement had to do in order to become a pan-national movement and effectively isolate the communist military was to conquer the silent majority, to become the incarnation not only of Poland's revolutionary and democratic tradition, but of Poland's tradition, period. And we worked hard on that. We started publishing underground stamps. Now, those stamps were never used on regular mail, of course. They were a way of collecting funds for the underground. But the stamps started conveying a message. The series of stamps you can see on the right just shows the different titles of underground publications being published in the time, a tribute by the artists who designed those stamps to underground printers and publishers. This, of course, is the underground revolutionary tradition. The stamp on the left is one of a series of 12 stamps that were put out to commemorate important national events of each month of the year. This is a stamp for April, commemorates from left to right a patriotic rising against the Tsar in the late 18th century, the victims of the massacre in Katyn in 1940 when the Soviet butchered interned Polish officers, and the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of 1943. All three with the Solidarity logo. This is no longer us being the revolutionary Democrats. We are claiming the nation. We are claiming the nation in all its historical vicissitudes and all its ethnic diversity. And if we are the nation, we the people, then they are Moscow's baggage. They no longer have any